Yeah, so as the off-tank in Asylum Sanctorium, when you're doing the hard mode +1/+2, the off-tank is basically one of the hardest roles in there. So main tank, very, very simple. Stand there, they have to hold block, and just play the mechanics. For the off-tank, there's a lot going on. You've got to be stacking adds, you've got to be moving, you've got to be sprinting, you've got to be going here, there, and everywhere. You've got to be avoiding damage, you've got to be trying to heal yourself and do everything you need to do. So for this trial, biggest priority for me is movement speed. It doesn't matter what class you're on. The big priority is making sure you've got plenty of like resources to sprint and heal yourself. You've got to make sure you've got swift jewelry. My personal setup is 3 swift jewelry with magical recovery. I like to have the Steed Munderstone, and I like to have Divine's gear. The reason I do that is to cap out on speed. You could also just use the Ring of the Wild Hunt, and you could set up in that kind of way. In terms of your tank gear, PA War Machine, PA Sax is ideal, but PA is very difficult to maintain in this trial. So I would say for most groups, dropping PA is absolutely fine. War Machine and Sax is probably the best setup to go for, unless you're kind of in a good group and you're able to keep a good uptime of PA, because it's hard. If you're having to kill the minis multiple times, then PA is not going to be a good set to use. You're not going to be getting any value out of it. If you're able to kill the minis once, or not at all, because you're able to skip and just focus the boss, then using PA is vital. But if you're not in that situation, then I would just use War Machine and Sax Champion. The reason for that is because the amount of ultimates that get used in this trial by the supports is sometimes not very good, so the group healer can be really far back and stay back too long. You've obviously got the kite healer at the front behind the main tank. Sometimes they can't get into groups, so that you're missing out on that ultimate potentially if they're not a necro. The main tank sometimes can't reach the full group if they're fanned out too far back. So as the off tank, you're the only person really who's in a prime position to always get your ultimate on the group. So using something like Sax Champion to give a higher major force, using something like War Machine because Roaring Opportunist doesn't get used in this trial, those gear sets will work really, really well. But like I say, if you are an experienced tank in a good group, PA and War Machine is a very good setup. In this video, I am using PA and War Machine. In terms of monster set, I would say there's 2 options. Number 1, the safe option, Earthgore. Now, you don't use it for the heal. You use Earthgore because when you stand on the poison that Lothis leaves behind, Earthgore procs inside the poison, makes it disappear. So if for some reason Lothis gets stuck in a really bad location and then teleports away, leaves his poison in the middle of the room, you can go and stand inside it. You've got to make sure you heal yourself. You stand inside the poison. When you get to 50% health and Earthgore procs on top of the poison, it will just cleanse it off the ground. But you've got to be stood in the middle of it. If you stand just on the edge of it, or just like around the ledge somewhere, it doesn't get rid of it. You have to be stood in the middle of the poison to make it go away with Earthgore. The other option is in Kratis, and that's because the main tanks in Kratis often won't reach the adds. So it's a good idea to potentially use that if you want to boost your damage and also reduce the fire damage for your group in the execute phase. They get 5% damage reduction for fire in the execute phase. So either one of those monster sets is really good. And let's go ahead and play the video. So I'm going to just go over exactly what I'm doing as we're playing through. So this is the off-tank perspective. As we go into the fight, at this stage here, I'm using PA and War Machine, so I'm just going in, I'm just getting PA on the group, trying to get Empower and Grasp on the group. But like, if you're newer to this trial, then obviously the main focus is getting the ads stacked and debuffing them. Like, that is the main priority. That is what you've got to do, because those ads need to die fast. So the ads always spawn in the same place. As you see now, the entrance is behind me. We've just walked in and we've took the boss where it is. At this stage of the fight, the main tank has to make sure the boss takes 1 step towards the main tank. If the boss doesn't step towards the main tank, what can happen is it can jump the opposite way. So as you go into the fight, if you don't see the boss move, then you need to let the off-tank know that they need to take a step backwards. Well, the boss needs to take a step towards the main tank, because it decides which way it's going to jump, depending on which way it's closest, which side it's closest to. So you have to make sure that it's closer to this side, or else it'll jump the opposite way around and it'll be all messed up. As the jump comes in, we move to the side. I move to the side, but you wouldn't necessarily need to on a tank. I'm just trying to maintain my buffs here. I'm keeping PA and Grasp up. And then the same thing happens. The jump happens. When the boss lands, it spits lightning. And then it goes into the Heavens phase. So you just wait for that to happen. It lands, and then we're going to get heavens. So you just, as the off-tank, just stand in a safe place. Now, a safe place for the off-tank is underneath the boss, right underneath the boss. Now, what you're looking for is this lightning. Look at this circle of lightning on the ground. Can you see this circle that never moves? If you stand near that, you'll never get hit by the AoEs that are dropping down on the rest of the group. So you stand next to that pool of lightning. It's a pool that doesn't move. It just stays there. You stand next to it. You go underneath the boss, and you're safe. You don't have to worry. Now, these lightning AoEs that travel across the floor, they move across the floor. If you get hit by 2 of those, make sure you purge. Because if you get hit by 3 or 4 of the lightning things that travel across the floor and hit people, each one of them does increased amounts of damage. If you get hit by 3 or 4, you're going to die. But you can purge, and that way, when the third one hits you, it's the same as being hit by the first one. So it doesn't have a big impact. So you just need to make sure you're watching out for that and you're purging if you need to. So now what happens is the boss has finished the heavens. The first ad is always going to spawn here. Lothis will always spawn here. So I'm waiting to instantly taunt it when it appears, and then I'm going to start sprinting to stack it. So it will always appear here and then teleport straight away. So you need to try and get the taunt really, really early. If you look at this, it's going to appear any second. I'm waiting for it. There it is. Boom. Taunts it. I might have missed the taunt there. So as you can see, when it moves, there's like a green smoke along the floor. That's the direction that the mini-boss is traveling in. So you look for that smoke across the floor, and that's the way that it's going to travel. So if I just go back a second and play it again, watch the boss teleport. You'll see a green line across the ground, so you know that's the way it's going. Look, watch this. The green line, there it is. So I know it's right behind me. And then I range taunt that, and I run across the room. Really, really fast. You've got to go fast. If it starts doing a mechanic, you're already too late. And then to stack it here, I stand at the side because I don't want it to be here. A lot of groups have Lothis stacked on the end of the tail. You don't want it there. You kind of want it really close to the boss. You want to be able to cleave everything. You don't want to have your group standing all the way back here, attacking the boss and missing the main boss, because the main boss had its hitbox reduced in size recently, which might mean that you might not get very much damage on the main boss if you focus in Lothis. But most groups don't focus it. They just focus the main boss, and you want to stack this really close so that the group can focus it. Now, there is a thing to remember here is there is a thing where Lothis will need interrupting. So Lothis needs interrupting occasionally. When it's near the boss, it's kind of your responsibility to help with interrupting. So most groups have an interrupter. But when you stack the boss really close into the main boss, it's difficult to get the interrupt. So your responsibility really here would be to make sure you get this interrupt. When the boss is at the back of the room in these corners here, then it's the interrupter's responsibility. I usually take responsibility if it's near the boss. So if the mini boss is near the main boss, I get the interrupts. If it's near the back of the room, the interrupter gets them, because we just split that in a way where I'm able to manage my interrupts. Sometimes the interrupter still gets them when it's here, but I'm there to get them at this point. So we stack it right inside. Look at this. It's right on the tail. Now, here's another little tip. If you taunt any of the mini-bosses, when they're stacked this close to St. Olms, the main boss, you can accidentally taunt the main boss. Now, there is a way to avoid taunting the main boss. Now, if you watch the tail, so that he's got a really long tail. The tail flicks and moves. It does like a flicking move. It moves and then it comes back, and it moves and it comes back. So you have to time your taunt. This point right now, where the tail is bending away from the mini boss, that's when you taunt it. When the tail is over the top of the mini boss, don't taunt it, because you're going to end up taunting the main boss. It's going to hit the tail, then you're going to taunt the main boss. So you always wait for the boss to flick its tail away from the ad. That's when you taunt, because that's the safe time. When the tail is through the mini boss, that's a bad time to taunt. So if you look at this now, so now's a good time to taunt. Now it's bad. Look, it's right on top. So don't taunt now. Now taunt. And there we go. Now we've got the jump phase. I'm going to be in charge of bashing the boss here, because the interrupter is at the side of the room. I'm making sure I'm refreshing my taunt before the main boss lands as well, because I know that it's going to be difficult. And I also want to have taunt of this boss for when it teleports away, because I need to stack it fast. So what's going to happen now is we're at 74%. The second jump has happened. We're going to get the second mini-boss appearing now. So what's going to happen is we're going to get Heavens. Then the next mini-boss is going to spawn in this corner over to the left side. And it always spawns in the same place. It will always spawn there every single time. So we know that Lothis always spawns at the back in the same place. We know that Felms is going to spawn in the exact same place as well. So there I've got the interrupt. This is perfect positioning. It's right on top of the tail. Now the boss has moved there. I'm going to try and move really, really quickly to try and stack him back in. But you can actually leave him there if you want to. As you can see, I just took a little step, didn't have to move very far, and now it's back in position. And now we're getting lots and lots and lots of damage onto that mini-boss. The next mini-boss is going to spawn soon as well, so we're going to get Heavens any second. I'm just trying to make sure I'm trying to buff up my group, because that boss is not going to move. It's doing a mechanic. There's the mini-boss. It's spawned behind me. It spawns, usually for me, when I'm doing a group, it'll spawn as the Heavens is starting to happen. So it'll appear in the exact same place. And now we want to stack this one in as well. So I'm being careful here because I'm waiting. I don't have my Earth Gore proc potentially, so I don't want to go and stand inside the poison. I've refreshed my taunt because the tail moved off the boss. Did you see how the tail is? Look how the tail is moving through the boss. And now it's moved. Now it's teleported to the back of the room. So what I'm going to prioritize here is I'm going to taunt Felms, but I'm going to also try and stack Lothis. So I'm prioritizing stacking Lothis, and the reason why is because Lothis gets stuck in mechanics and Felms doesn't. Felms can be stacked really easy. So watch this now. So we taunt Lothis, we taunt Felms. I'm going to run past the boss to try and stack Lothis. I didn't get taunt, it didn't work. I tried to taunt it, it didn't work. But now I'm going to run past the boss to get it on the tail. Felms is taking damage right now as I'm moving it in. But look, Felms hasn't gone too far. I've stacked that boss in. I'm going to take Felms back in, and we're going to get the damage on it. You have to try and stack Lothis whenever it's not doing a mechanic, but it's also a very good time. So you always want to stack Lothis when Felms is jumping, and as soon as Lothis moves, you want to try and stack it quickly then. So it's just teleported away. The smoke's gone along the ground. I know where it is. He's stuck in a mechanic, look. Lothis is stuck in a mechanic. When it does the cone, you know you've got like 8 seconds where you can't move it. I could get that interrupt there, and I do. Or I don't. Actually, I don't. I'm running back to go and retaunt Felms. I always go and retaunt him from the back of the room, and that's so I can stack Lothis while I'm getting Felms. So I'm running to fetch Felms. I'm running across the back of the room to catch Felms. But as I'm doing it, I'm also stacking Lothis without looking, because I know if I go and stand in the opposite corner to where where Lothis is, he's going to stack. So that's how I managed to get it stacked then. I mean, it's not stacked as good. It's at the side there. I'd prefer it to be here. But it's not a problem. So the way that you do that, obviously, you see where the boss is. So if the mini-boss is over here, when you go to taunt Felms at the back of the room, you run to the opposite side. So then it'll just automatically stack as you're fetching Felms. Nice and easy. You don't really have to think about it if you're doing that. The only time it becomes a problem, and obviously you can't do that, is when it teleports to the other side of the room. When it's near the boss, you can easily get it stacked while going to catch Felms. Now here, we're in a mechanic again. So I could move Lothis now. Once this mechanic ends. So we're trying to... I'm not going to even try to move it. Now I've seen it's gone to the other side. I'm just going to bring the mini-boss over to here. If you leave Lothis here, because of the way that St. Olms jumps, it's always closer to the entrance side. So actually, when Lothis teleports to the entrance side of the room, you can just leave him there. You don't actually have to move him. So I think I actually might do that here, because can you see he's quite close to the main boss already. This stack is not super important. You don't have to move it from this position because it's still within cleave damage. It's going to take cleave damage, but you want it to ideally be on the tail for the perfect stack. But you don't need it to be. Like here, we don't even need to prioritize stacking Lothis at this point because we've got a minute left to kill it and it's nearly dead. It's got 9%, so I'm not even that worried about stacking it anymore. The group are trying to focus Felms down and Lothis is just going to die a bit early. So you always want to try and push the mini-bosses to the limit. So ideally, you'd start trying to kill Lothis at 2 minutes 45. If it's got loads of health, then obviously you need to focus it from 2 minutes. So if Lothis has more than 50% health, and you've only got a minute left to kill it, you need to hard focus it. If it's got low health, you don't need to kill it until 2 minutes 45. So we're getting to 2 minutes 30. You can see the time is just in the middle of the screen there. That's just to kind of help out, because obviously we're on PC. As you can see here, I'm trying to stack it. Felms is running past the boss a little bit. But if you look at it, I've got him. I'm going back in. Lothis is down. We've killed Lothis. So now the priority is to just try and keep Felms on the boss as much as possible. We're on 2 minutes on Felms at this point. So we need a lot of damage. And the reason this is a problem is because Felms will constantly keep jumping. The best way to kill Felms is to always make sure you focus Felms when he's walking in. So he does 3 jumps. Now the positioning of Felms always needs to be closer to the healer that is near the tank. So you want to keep Felms really close to the boss's feet / tail area. As you see now when I bring him in, so I'm going to bring Felms in. I always range taunt at the back of the room. I always go back here, pick him up, and then I'll go back in. Now, you need to keep him really close to the other healer. So as you can see, I'm really close to this side of the room. This is a good position for Felms because you always want it to jump to the back, to the front, and to the back again. There's always 3 jumps. So as you can see, I'm near the feet because I don't want it to jump on this front healer first. I always want it to jump on the back healer first. And the way to make that happen is to make sure that it's always positioned really close to the feet, to the tail, and closer to that side of the room. So when it jumps now, it jumps to the back first, not the front. We don't want it to jump at the front first. And this always means as well, when you go and range taunt the boss, it's always going to be in the same place. So if you've positioned yourself correct, the healers have also got to position themselves correct. It's not always down to you. Sometimes the healers can mess it up. In this case here, it jumped to me, and I think the healer was actually too far back. But I knew Lothis was coming back, and I'm going in because it always needs interrupting when he comes back. So Lothis, when it respawns, always needs interrupting instantly. Now in this case, we're on 25% nearly. The jump's about to happen. I am not trying to stack Lothis for it to die. We can kill Lothis. Sorry, we can kill the main boss without killing Lothis at this point. So I'm just kind of bringing in Felms. We do need to kill Felms because we've only got 15 seconds till it enrages. When it starts to enrage, there's different levels of enrage. So it starts at like level 1, level 2, level 3. The higher level up the enrage it gets, the more damage it does to people in your group. So you have to be really, really careful. But in terms of this one, I'm just trying to now hold Lothis out of the way. This is not out of the way. So for this phase now, I'm trying to get Felms killed. I'm trying to make sure Felms dies. He's enraged at this point, so it's a real problem. And we're into execute as well, so we've got a lot of damage incoming. If you stand inside these AoEs while Felms is enraged, you can probably guess that you're going to die, so you have to be careful. Lothis isn't going to die. The boss is on 25%. So what we're trying to do here is just pull Lothis into a position where I can interrupt it and keep my group buffed up. So I'm trying to taunt it and interrupt it. I'm trying to get the interrupter now to focus on the main boss, and I'm trying to get the interrupts. We need to kill Felms really quick here because he's enraged. When he throws this in the air here, if that lands on a group member, they're dead. If it hits them, they're dead. It's a big problem. So Lothis is going to keep moving. As you see, he's kind of automatically stacking. I didn't really want it to. But that's my priority right now, is just to get taunt. Seem to be struggling to taunt it there. And the main thing is just holding it, range taunting, interrupting, buffing my group, and then trying to avoid damage. Like at this point now, we're trying really hard to avoid damage. In particular for myself here, I'm in medium armor and it's a real problem. So I can take a lot of damage in a very short space of time. Because we've got the fire phase now, so I'm going to be purging my group as well. And I'm just standing near Lothis. I don't need to go anywhere else. I can just stand near him. Now he's moving. This is where it gets a bit critical, because you've got to look which direction the smoke goes in to see where he's gone. Because you need to be able to interrupt him nice and quick. You don't want your group to be taking too much damage, especially if the fire is happening at the same time as the boss doing its interruptible. Here comes the interrupt. We've got the interrupt quickly, and then we're just standing underneath the boss, look. Just going underneath the boss, next to that pool of lightning on the ground. There's a big pool of lightning that doesn't move. You stand next to it. Make sure you purge yourself if you get hit by more than 2 of those AoEs. And then we're trying to buff up the group, and we're looking out for that interrupt. Here it comes again, making sure we've got the taunt. And it's just rinse and repeat to execute. Now, depending on your group DPS, you might have had to have killed that again, because you don't want to push the boss too early. So don't follow this video in terms of looking at it and how you're going to push damage, because obviously we've got quite a decent group, good damage. It's not like world-class score push type damage. This is like decent team kind of damage, so we're able to push the bosses and stuff quite well. However, in a lot of groups, especially if you're going into a progression group, you will need to keep killing the mini-bosses for a bit longer, because the chances are you won't have the same amount of damage, or you won't have people on target as much as we have here. So I'm trying to just get everything sorted out, and there it is. Job done. So that is the off-tanking of that trial. Now, I know it looks easy, to be honest. Like, when you watch that, because it's done more or less correctly, it looks easy. But you're probably going to have to kill the mini-bosses a lot more. You're going to have to just keep up doing the same thing, though. It's important to just make sure you've got loads and loads of movement speed. You've just got to make sure that you're doing those things that I explained. So making sure when Lothis is near the main boss and Felms is jumping, you've got to make sure you've got Felms positioned correctly so it always jumps to the back first. That way, you can automatically stack Lothis every single time you go to pick up Felms. So you can run towards Felms diagonally, you stand in the corners, that drags Lothis onto the tail. You get Felms, you bring it in. So you don't lose any time doing it that way. Another way is when you're going forward. If both bosses are like at the back of the room, so you've got Lothis here, you've got Felms at the back, you run back there, you taunt both, and then you run to like forward, and then they both stack at the same time. So you do kind of have to make sure when Lothis is not doing a mechanic, or when Felms is jumping, you always try to stack Lothis. Now you can get Lothis quite close to the boss without taking Felms too far away. So if you've got Felms in this situation, if you stand kind of near the foot of the boss, you can bring Lothis to the back end of the tail. So you can get Lothis stacked quite well. Just make sure you stand diagonally to where Lothis is, and you stood near the foot. That way, you keep Felms underneath the boss taking damage, but you also bring Lothis into the stack without it really doing anything. And one of the tricky things is just maintaining taunt all the time on both of the minis, because every time they're teleporting away, it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget that you need to go and taunt them, you need to grab hold of them, you need to make sure you haven't lost aggro, you need to be constantly taunting them. And if you follow the little trick for taunting when they're stacked on the boss as well, that will definitely help. So making sure you only taunt the mini-bosses when they're close to St. Olms, when the tail isn't overlapping. You have to wait for that tail whip. So when it moves, the tail moves, you taunt when that kind of time is available. And yeah, if you've got any questions for me, let me know, and I'll hopefully try and help you in terms of this trial. So there we go, guys. Thank you. Thank you for watching.